You know, when the drums of war were beating back in 2002, it was very unpopular to be against the war. And the administration, as we know now, had launched this major PR assault, talking about mushroom clouds and the imminent danger that Saddam Hussein posed to the United States. And I looked at all the information that was publicly available and became absolutely convinced that this was the wrong thing to do. I was in the midst of a U.S. Senate race, and so a number of my advisors suggested, don't step out on this because everybody anticipated correctly that U.S. forces would overwhelm Saddam Hussein on the front end. But my concern wasn't the effectiveness of the U.S. military. It was the aftermath once we had deposed Saddam Hussein, that the threat, in fact, wasn't imminent, and that this would cost us billions of dollars and thousands of lives, and that ultimately we would have no clear exit strategy and would, most importantly, distract us from the battle that had not been finished in Afghanistan, dealing with al-Qaeda, the people who had actually perpetrated 9/11, and that it would fan the flames of anti-American sentiment throughout the world, and particularly in the Middle East. So I gave a speech at an anti-war rally here in Chicago back in October of 2002.
I don't oppose war in all circumstances, and when I look out over this crowd today, I know there is no shortage of patriots or patriotism. What I do oppose is a dumb war.
Most of the concerns that I expressed in that speech have come to pass, given the enormous sacrifice of our soldiers and the bravery that they've shown. I wish that our civilian leadership had not failed them as badly as it has. But what is now clear after over 3,700 American lives lost, after more than $500 billion of money spent, and with what appears to be no end in sight, at least from the president's perspective, I think that we now understand that this has been probably the biggest foreign policy fiasco in a generation. So what I've said is that we've got to be as responsible and careful getting out as we were careless getting in, but we need to get our troops out of the combat roles that they've been placed in. They should not be refereeing a civil war in Iraq.
I will begin to remove our troops from Iraq immediately. I will remove 1 or 2 brigades a month and get all of our combat troops out of Iraq within 16 months.
Undoing the damage of this policy in Iraq is going to take years. Now, what I have said is that there are no good options left in Iraq. There are bad options and worse options. The only way we're going to achieve any semblance of stability in Iraq is if the Shia and the Sunni in particular, as well as the Kurds and other factions in Iraq, are able to arrive at a political accommodation. Iraq needs a new constitutional convention that would include representatives from all levels of Iraqi society, in and out of government. To reconcile, the Iraqis must also meet key political benchmarks outside of the constitutional process, including new local elections and revising de-Baathification. There's been no diplomatic surge, no political surge from this administration. They have simply thrown U.S. troops at the problem, and it has not worked. We need to launch the most aggressive diplomatic effort in recent history to reach a new compact in the region. This effort should include all of Iraq's neighbors, and we should also bring in the United Nations Security Council. All of us have a stake in Iraq's stability. It's going to be just as important for us to talk to all the major powers in the region, not only our traditional friends like Jordan or Saudi Arabia, but also Iran and Syria, countries that we don't like. A strong president and a strong nation are not afraid to talk to their adversaries and tell them where America stands. Not talking doesn't make us look tough. It makes us look arrogant, and it doesn't get results. Tens of thousands of people have died in Iraq since this war began. Millions of people have been displaced. We have not done enough to tend to their needs, to give them some support. And so creating a humanitarian infrastructure, making sure that we are sending a clear signal to the factions in Iraq that genocide or ethnic cleansing will not be tolerated by the international community, and that we are keeping track of how the various factions are behaving. That will set the stage for, I think, the larger challenge, and that is for us to restore our moral standing in the world, to restore America's legitimacy in many quarters where we have seen the Bush administration erode our reputation. I want to be able to go before the United Nations and say, America's back.
It's time to make diplomacy a top priority. Instead of shuttering consulates, we need to open them in the tough and hopeless corners of the world. Instead of having more Americans serve in military bands than the diplomatic corps, we need to grow our foreign service. Instead of retreating from the world, I will personally lead a new chapter of American engagement.
Strength is measured by the power of your convictions. What are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to put on the table on behalf of what's right? For a nation like America that has always drawn strength from our principles, to have abandoned them, denigrate the protection of our civil liberties, to not punish any high-ranking officers for what happened at Abu Ghraib, for us to not hold ourselves up to our highest ideals when it comes to selling a war or when it comes to how we treat veterans when they come home. I think all those things have made us weaker, not stronger. They're displays of fear as opposed to displays of courage.
In the 21st century, progress must mean more than a vote at the ballot box. It must mean freedom from fear and freedom from want. We can't stand for the freedom of anarchy. We can't stand for the freedom of poverty, nor can we support the globalization of an empty stomach.
The next president's task, I think, is to end the politics of fear and to restore a politics of hope in our foreign policy. And that's what I think not only Americans are eager to see, but people all around the world are eager to see.